Welcome to the Middleware Tech YouTube channel. You'll learn about web application using SpringBoot. All code examples used in the videos will be available on GitHub. Let's get started.
Web application using a SpringBoot or right, that's it. So to understand this web application using a SpringBoot using MVC, using a Spring MVC, right? First we should have a good understanding about Spring MVC first, right? Then we'll see how we can understand how I can implement a web application using a SpringBoot. Right. So what we know about Spring MVC, that we have to talk about first. What we know about Spring MVC already. Yes, when talking about Spring MVC, we know, like, assume this is my client. Let me talk about first about Spring MVC, then I'll talk about web application using a Spring Boot. So what we know already about Spring MVC. Let me say some of the points about Spring MVC, like, as you know that Spring MVC contain view layer, control layer, business layer, service layer. If I want to create a new web application using a Spring MVC for a particular use case, so what we have is that we have this layer. Let's see here, let me write it. Let's say I'm going to create a Spring MVC application. Okay. So in your Spring MVC application, assume this is your client here. This is your client here. So let me just write it here as a client. Client here is going to interact with the controller layer. So assume this is the controller layer. So controller and this controller is going to interact with the service layer. Assume this is our service layer. Service actually interact with the DAO layer, and assume this is the DAO layer, and this DAO layer actually interact with the database. Correct. This is going to interact with the database. Correct. Now this is the flow that we follow in Spring MVC, and what we find in Spring MVC is that all these layers, controller, service, and DAO, these are all POJO. All this layer, these are all POJO, plain old Java object in Spring MVC. And all this layer actually work above the container. Name of the container is application context. Spring application Spring application context. So the complete application will work above this container, right? Now when the request will come, There is a concept of exception handling. There is a concept of I/18 support. That means multiple language support. That application will be available to the client in multiple language. There is a concept of interceptor, view resolvers, multi-action controllers. So this is how we can create a good Spring MVC application. But in Spring MVC application, this is my front end. Remember this, let me say, write some point that already we know about Spring MVC. Let me write some point, then we'll move one by one. So first point, if I want to say here, model, view, and controller are POJO. Plain old Java object that already we know. In case of Spring MVC, I'm just talking about some Spring MVC features. Another one point about them is that all executes above IOC or application context container. Right. Then if I want to say some more point, then I want to say that it support the concept of Spring MVC, support the concept of I/18. It has a concept of you already know, right? That is a view resolver. View resolver. View resolver means in which format the response will go to the client, that you can define in case of Spring MVC. If it is an HTML response, it will go as an HTML. If it's a JSP response, it will go as a JSP. Or if it's, any other audio or video response, it will go as an like that. It is a concept of interceptor. These are the features of a Spring MVC. Right now, this follow one type of pattern, front controller design pattern. That means this means whatever request is coming from the client, that will be handled by a single servlet. In case of a Spring framework, the name of the single servlet is dispatcher servlet. Right. So you can say that Spring MVC support front controller design pattern. It support Spring MVC support front controller design pattern into the controller layer, support front controller design pattern in the controller layer. Right. Next, in the data access layer, it supports the DAO, as well as in the business layer, it support the design pattern that is called business delegate. You can say like that. Support business delegate design pattern in business layer. Another, we can say it support DAO design pattern into the DAO layer. Support data access object DAO design. Like this way, you can add multiple features that it supports in our Spring MVC. But what we should know about Spring Embassy before coming into here, how the flow work, how the actual application flow work in case of Spring Embassy, that we should know very well. Application flow work means what? I'll just see here. Assume this is your the complete container. Assume this is the complete container. Okay. So I'm talking about this is the servlet container or something like that. This is the complete servlet container. Now, when any particular request come from the client, when a request will come from the client, so assume this is my request. So I can say incoming client request, and I can say here outgoing client request. So just make it here incoming request and make it here as an outgoing response. Outgoing response. Correct? Fine. So as I told you that Spring MVC support front controller design pattern, and the name of the front controller is dispatcher servlet. Correct. So when the request will come, that request will come first to whom? To the front controller. So request will come to front controller. Right. So from the front controller, the corresponding request. So when the request leaves the browser asking for URL, with some request parameters. So request will first examined by the front controller. Its name is dispatcher servlet. Now this dispatcher servlet front controller, it will interact with some handler mapping defined in the configuration file. So it will interact with some handler mapping defined in the configuration file. So it will interact with handler mapping, right? This dispatcher servlet or front controller is interacting with the handler mapping to forward or delegate that particular request to a responsible controller. So assume this is the handler or this is the name of the controller, right? Right. So the controller applies. So this is information associated with the logical name. Now this dispatcher servlet, when the request forwarded to this controller, it can be any registration controller, login controller, search controller, right? Like this, any account controller, right? So request is handled by this specific controller, right? So the information associated with the logical name of the result, so when the particular controller completed its task, you can have multiple controller here. You can have multiple controller. Okay, you can have multiple controller here. So when any particular controller completed some task, so what happened is that it will return a model and view object to the it will return a model and view object the controller front controller. So what is that model and view object? It will return model and view object, model and view object to the front controller. So dispatcher servlet, right, to the front controller, dispatcher servlet. So dispatcher servlet then consult the logical view name, right? So what it will do is that it will dispatcher servlet will call another one component, and name of the component is view resolver. So assume the corresponding component name is this, and name of the component name is view resolver. View resolver. So just control server, response server want to know that what type of response it is. Now view resolver will send the response to the controller. It will send the response to the controller saying yes. So it will return response that the response is of JSP type or HTML type or PHP type or some other file. So response will go to the dispatcher servlet and the font controller. Then font controller send the corresponding response, right? So this is how the flow will work for our Spring MVC. Now, how the request will go from dispatcher servlet to a specific controller? There is a concept of handler mapping. There is some default handler mapping, as well as you can create your own user-defined handler mapping also. By default, bin name URL handler mapping class actually work to forward the request from dispatcher servlet to a specific controller. There's different types of URL mapping. Similarly, what type of response coming from the controller? Front controller or dispatcher servlet want to know. Then it will forward the request to view resolver. View resolver will identify what type of response it is. So there is different types of view resolvers is there, like internal resource view resolver, right? Then it is going to send the corresponding response to the front controller or dispatcher server that the response is of JSP type. Then it is going to send the response to the user. So this is how Spring MVC flow work. And if you have worked on a first option, second option is load that Maven project in Eclipse, load the Maven project using Eclipse, and the third one is you have to add any dependency if it is required. Add if. Let's do it, else it will not work. Let's do it. Now, what type of application we want to do using this, using a SpringBoot or application? What type of application we'll do? Let me just show you first. Let me show you first what type of application you're going to do. So assume this is one client and this is another one client. We have two clients. This is the first client and this is the second client. Now what this client is doing is that they are sending a request to the dispatcher servlet or the Spring Boot application. So both of them is sending request to Spring Boot application, both of them. And assume this is your Spring Boot application. Right? Now where the request will go? So what type of application we are going to do? So both the request, okay, assume both the request will come to whom? To the controller. Both the request will come to the controller. When the request came to the controller, from the controller, this request will go to the service layer. So from the controller, you can forward the request, you can say as a service layer. From the service layer, you can forward the request to component called DAO layer. Just right here DAO. This is the flow, right? This is the flow. So this flow you want to implement using a Spring Boot. Now what I want is that assume I'm interacting on the login page. So assume this is login page.jsp. Login page.jsp. So when you logged in using login page.jsp, it will come to the controller. Whatever the controller name, assume its name is user controller. Assume its name is user controller. So from the user controller, the request will come to user service. From the user service, it will go to user DAO. It will go to user DAO. Right. After that, it is going to cross check, whether the username and password is correct or not. So if the username password is correct, you can just remove this. You can do this as success page.jsp, or you can make it as failure page.jsp. So the request came, then the corresponding response will come. So assume the response will come from the DAO layer to the service layer to the controller layer. From controller layer, either it will come to you or it will come to like this. This will work. So we are going to create this type of application using Spring Boot. So first we'll see that whether the corresponding setup is working or not. Then we'll come on to this format. Okay, so if I want to write some points here, Spring Boot, then what you can say is that let's create the project first, one by one. Let's create the project first. So to create the project, let me close Spring Boot Web App. So create a particular project here, Maven project Java. Let's just write a SpringBoot web app. Okay. Now here two dependencies, web and DevTools. I don't need any other dependency to add generate. So this is my project. Now this one, right click, cut. You can take it inside this folder. You can extract this and open this project using Eclipse. So this is our project that we have copied just now. Now what I want to do is that let me just see here how we can take a particular client request from the user. Let me just see a small example how I can take a client request from the user. Before going to the login application or sign up application, we'll see using a SpringBoot how I can take any client request from an user. Right. So remember, let me create one page first. Go to src main. There is no web app folder. So generally we use right click new folder. Use a folder name as web app. Inside the web app folder, we generally use right click new folder. Generally use the corresponding folder name as web app pages. Finish. That's it. So what I have to do first, this task is done. Create project using Spring Initializer, load the moment project in Eclipse, and add dependency if required. Now we have loaded using moment dependency to see here. Yes, we have loaded. Fine. Right. Okay. So let's create a page, any page, just to see how it works. Like index.jsp. Any page I created. HTML. And just right here. Welcome to SpringBoot. This is the user interface, right? Okay, so if I send a request to a particular controller, okay, so I have to write a controller, right? Security controller. Just here, right click new class controller, okay. Assume the controller name is my controller, and If the request will come to this controller, there will be the annotation called @controller. Now here, what I want, this my controller class it's a controller, right? So if you say if you send anybody a request, class customer is going to send a request, so it is going to send a particular user interface, okay, login page, okay, or index page you want to send. So what happened is that this controller is going to send something, some login page or home page, something like that. So okay, right. So what type of return type generally controller send? Model and view object. So you can just write public model and view, okay, like home view, home page view or something like that. This is my method assume. Model and view object, if you have to import, you can import. Now I have to create a model and view object, right? Then I have to return it. Control C, model and view object obj equal to new model and view object, and name of the page is login page. Right, and this one then I'm going to return obj control S. Right, so the request should come to a particular in a particular path, right? So how generally we take the request with the help of the annotations called request mapping. Right, save it. Now it will take some parameter, right? When going to take the request, value equal to provide some path slash home. Now assume this is like this, and it is returning like this. Now the value part, just use some unique name where the request will come. And when you're going to send a particular request, assume you're going to send a get type request. So you can use method equal to request method dot get. That's it. Control S. So the request will come into that link or slash home. Then it forward the request index.jsp. So you can write an index. Let me check it is working first or not. Control S. This is my controller. Okay, controller is sending a request slash home. It will come to this method and it will going to return index.jsp page. That's it. Right? It should work. Yes, another things you have to provide in case of, since you're talking about web application, right, in SpringBoot, you have to provide the path of your pages, prefix and the suffix. Generally, if you remember in Spring Embassy, we have the component called view resolver. You define that view resolver, right? And the purpose of view resolver is that what type of response it is. To cross check, it is a HTML type response, JSP type response based on the forward the request. But how I can do the same task here? Here I have to define the response inside application REST, and request will forward it to this controller in this path, and the controller is returning a model and view object. So this model and view object is what type of response it is. It will identify using application or properties using view resolver. Then it is returning a response of this type. Right, so it is working fine, right? So but this is not our simple application. You can see here how well you can do it, where you don't have to think about dispatcher servlet at all. Only you have to focus on the UI layer and the controller layer. That's it, no other focus. But this is not the end. We have to create a application like login and sign up using SpringBoot. We will do this type of application using SpringBoot. This one we'll do next. Yes, you're familiar with how it works. These are slight advanced, you may find it, but not tough. So how I can create an web application using a Spring Boot, like login or sign up, some two use case, if you can think. That we're going to focus next. Web, another is called developer tools. So already you know, right? Web starter web dependency is used to create MVC application. Another is using Spring, and dev tools is used because you don't have to restart the server multiple times. The server, any update, server will automatically restart. So that's why we are going to use these two dependencies, right? In the last application that we have done. Okay. Now this is the controller. That my controller we have used. All right, so just to check how so what we have done for this is that we have created the view layer. We have created a web app folder inside the main. Inside web app we have created a folder called pages. Inside a page we have just created a simple JSP page. Simple JSP page, normal JSP page. What we want, if client based on the client request, this JSP page should be visible to the client. So when client will send a request, client is sending a request in this path, right? So the request will come into the path, /home. The request will forward in this path /home. So when the request will come in this, so request will go to your dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet, it will move to that particular supporting controller. And this my controller will send the corresponding response as a model and view object. Already I told you, right? When the response will go as a model and view object to the front controller or dispatcher servlet, it will use view resolver to cross check what type of return response it is, and that response it will send to the client. So that only we are going to do here when your the client is going to is returning a model and view object. It will go to our inbuilt servlet, dispatcher servlet, and it is going to return the response, what type of response it is. So for this, in the application.properties file, you have to define prefix and suffix. Prefix, page name is defined inside the package called pages, and the suffix is .jsp. So if it is, then it is going to return a response of .jsp, index.jsp to the client. So we have to provide the corresponding prefix and suffix from the page extension inside the application.properties file, right? So our right. So in this Spring Boot application, if you see lots of things is hidden. You don't have to take care of. You don't have to think about the web.xml file. You don't have to think about servlet, Spring dispatcher servlet.xml and the corresponding configurations. Everything will be taken care of by Spring boot, right? So what we have to do is that in our Spring Boot application, the view layer we have to provide, view layer. We have to provide the controller, DAO layer as well as service layer here. And we have to, if you start the server, if we start the server, if you see here, if we start the server, then we can execute our application, right? So we don't have to focus on the complex side like web.xml file as well as implementation in Spring Display server.xml file. Not required to go into that. That will be taken care of by Spring Boot itself. Right. Another one point is that in the pom.xml file, we have to provide the dependencies. Which dependency I need to add? So in our example, we have added one dependency. If you remember, this is the dependency that we have added. Right click source format. It's called Tomcat Jasper dependency. Why? Because it will convert your JSP as a servlet. Okay. To then only that the corresponding response will come to the client, right? So for this, we need this dependency, Tomcat Jasper dependency. It is using Tomcat 9.0 version, right? And you can see the since you have added the dependency, right? If you see in the Marvin dependency, you can see here the corresponding Tomcat embedded Tomcat version 9.0.39. Correct, right? And these are all the dependencies you can see here. That that will be handled by Marvin, so I don't have to think about all those things. Fine. So next what we will do is that using Spring Boot, just you have to show that yes how it work. So in the same project, I'm not going to create a new project at all. The same project, I want to implement two use cases. One is called login, another is called sign up. Let's say I'm going, if you can do one use case, you can do a more use case also. This is the more important one. So let's try this one. We are talking about the use case called login. So what type of application? Our focus is like this. Is that when you send a request in the login page.jsp, a given user ID and password. Okay. So this user ID and password will come to where? User ID and password. It will come to controller, user controller. What user controller will do? User controller will forward the request to the service layer, user service. User service, what it will do? It will forward the request to the DAO layer, user DAO. User DAO will interact with the database. Though database interaction will do in the next. Okay. So let's do this. What we are going to do for the login use case. So what you have to do first, login use case. This three. Okay, Tomcat Jasper dependency we have not yet added. Let me add this Tomcat Jasper dependency. So what I'll do is that let me do it from the last project. Just copy this dependency here also. Control C. Tomcat Jasper dependency. Control V. Source format. Just select your project and right click, Marvin, update project. Right click, run as Marvin clean. Right click, run as Marvin install. Okay, it is not cleaned yet. Right click, refresh, right click, close. Maven, right click, run as, Maven clean. Run as Maven install. Yes, so not have right click source format. Fine. Now let me check whether it is working or not. Right click, run as Java application. Okay, it is saying that the port number is not listening. So let me do once again. Right click, run as Java application. It is working fine, right? Fine. So let's move with this step by step. So if I talk about this login part, so it has a different layer: view, controller, then we have service, DAO layer. So these are 4 layers. So if I'm going to implement it in the same 4 layer, then how we want is that first we want login page.jsp. Fine. So in the view layer, I should have, you can see here, this 3 page. View layer, I should login page.jsp, success.jsp. Then I should have failure.jsp. Then in the controller layer, we should have login controller.java. Service layer, you can write login service.java. And the DAO layer, I'm going to implement it like this: login DAO.java. Right? So this is the flow, right? Interaction. So what we'll do is that we'll implement this example using Spring Boot. Okay, using Spring Boot. So what you have to do first, let's come with this view layer first. Let me create these pages, view layer pages in the following directory. So you can say number 4, you can say create view pages inside web app slash pages folder. Control S. Let me do it. So here, this is my project, right? So this is SRG main. Inside the main, you have to create a particular folder. Its name is Web App. Inside Web App, you have to create a particular folder. Its name is Pages. Inside Pages, you have to create a particular file. Name of the file is login page dot JSP. Success.jsp and file failure.jsp. All right, so we should have total 3 pages. So this part is over. No, I want to create the complete username password structure. It's fine, you can do this one. How to create this login page, login window. So better, try to use a good user interface from using Bootstrap. So get bootstrap.com and from here select some good user interface using Bootstrap. Actually, I want to create a good user interface. That's why I'm just going to getbootstrap.com. I was searching for some component. You're not getting, you can do one thing. Login using Get Bootstrap. Now here we can get getbootstrap.com popular sign-in template in Bootstrap. Yes, this is the sign-in template in Bootstrap, right? So if you want to get this, it generally comes here. I have seen. Yes, this is the basic template of Bootstrap. Fine. Control C, Control V, Control S. Fine. Now here, what I want to do is that I want to get it in login page. Login layout. Component forms. So when it comes to forms, you can see here right? Email ID and password, or user ID and password that you're going to insert for a login page. You can use this type of login, mysource. Right, or if you want to create your own login, that is also fine as you wish. So I have created this user interface using Bootstrap, and what I want is that I want to use H1, right? This is a login application. Login using the SpringBoot, right? Now here, here you take two fields, user ID and password, and then submit button. I can use this also from user ID. Input type equal to text. I'm not going to write. Let me just copy paste this page from some other location. It's not too much time. Login using SpringBoot. Okay, so user ID, I'm going to insert input type equal to text. Okay, name equal to, you can use here UID. Okay, similarly I have to use password. Type equal to password, name equal to pass. Now when you insert this, you can use the BR so that it will come to the next line. Now form action equal to, you have to use some name. So there is a disconnection from my end. Let me just share my desktop.
Привет. Привет. У меня тут базирование большое осталось.
See here, we're creating the user interface, and here this is my login page. When you create this login page, first in the login page, I'm going to create that user ID and password. There's two buttons. So once this button is, this is the form element. You have to start the form element, and you have to close the form element. Control X. You have to close the form element here. Fine, just save this. Now this is the login page, right? And you're passing user ID password, and just assume you're going to click some submit button. So input type equal to submit and value equal to submit. Fine. Now what you're going to do is that if you see this is our focus. So this login page.jsp that we are creating now, right? So when you click submit, insert the value and click submit, the request should go to user controller.java file, right? Fine. So that you're doing here. So just run method equal to post. That's fine. Now here, this is my login page.jsp. The login.page.jsp is available inside the pages folder. The failure.jsp, login page.jsp, and success.jsp. Correct. Now when you click submit, you've given user ID and password and click submit, the request will be forwarded into a particular controller, into this path, right? So it will go to a particular controller. So first I need this page should come. First I need this page should come. How this page will come? When I send a request using /home, I need this page should come, you know, right? So what you can do is here inside the control, what is my controller class? Let's create a controller class, right click new class. As I've given here, we have to get 3 class: controller, service, and the DAO. This part we have written. Now I'm talking about the controller layer. In the controller, I have to create login controller.java, right? So just write login controller. Okay, finish. Now this login controller I have created in the same package, if you see, and the server started automatically because our SpringBoot dev tools we have used in the dependency. Now this is the login controller. I'm using everyone in the same package for the time being because it's a very simple application, that's why. Now this login controller, the request should forward to this login controller. How? With the annotation called @controller. Okay. We can import. Now what I want is that first time when I write this application, I need the login page should come to the client. First time when I'm running the application, I want this login page should come to the client. First time, okay, I'm interacting with the application, right? The login page should come first time, right? So how it will come? I said request. So in that case, just write a particular method that is going to return the login page. So write a particular method that is going to return a model view object, right? So first time when I send a request, assume first time I'm going to send a request using this http://localhost:8080/home. Okay, this is the first request I made. First request I made, step 1. So /home is the first request. So request will go to this /home. So where is this /home? /home will be defined inside a method. Just write here public model and view. Okay. Login page. Enter. Okay. So if you see here, model and view login page, now the request will come inside in this path /home. So how to define the path? You can define the path using the annotation called address request mapping. Request mapping, and you can use some value equal to /login. Okay, and you can use a method equal to request method dot get, something like that, right? Request method dot get. So get type request. So initially when the request comes, we have to import this model and view. Okay, so initially first time when the request will come, it will come to this method in the path called home. Control S, because step one, when that's going to send the request will come in this path. Correct. So that's why we used here /home. Assume. Now this, what we are going to do, this is going to return what when the request will come in this path to the dispatcher solver. Dispatcher solver will forward the request to this controller, login controller. Login controller will return a model and view object. Login controller will return a model and view object. So you can write control and view object obj equal to new control v model and view. What type of object it is? It is returning the login page name. This is the login page name that I wanted to. That page should come to the client first time, right? So you can just make it as a login page. Login page. Okay, so just write here return obj. So this method is returning public model and view. Yes, it's fine. Return a statement. It's fine. It's okay. And now why it is giving add return a statement? I have added return a statement. Login page 1 or something like that. Is there any error? Control S. It is Control S. That's it. Now this is a login controller class. So when the request will come first time, it will come to the dispatcher servlet. From dispatcher servlet, it will forward the request to this login controller in this path. So what this login controller, this method, login page method is doing, it is returning a model and view object. So when it got this model and view object, returning a model and view object, this controller. When it got the model and view object, then it will check what type of model and view object it is. How it will check what type of model and view object it is. So for this, you have to provide MVC view prefix and suffix inside the application.properties file. You have to come to application.properties. Where it is, application.properties, you'll find somewhere. Yes. In this application.properties file, you have to provide two parameters. When model and view object is returning something, what is the prefix and what is the suffix? Based on that, you have to send a response to the dispatcher servlet. Correct. So you can provide a spring dot mvc dot view dot prefix. So prefix is defined inside a path called pages, and similarly spring dot mvc dot view dot suffix, and this is actually defined inside equal to .jsp extensions. You have to provide this inside the application properties file. All right, so when you provide it in the application properties file, what will happen is that this is going to, when it is going to return a model view object to the dispatcher servlet, dispatcher servlet can understand that yes, the Madeline boy object is one type of JSP page. Then it will forward the corresponding request to the JSP page so that this model login view.jsp page will be available, or login page.jsp will be available, right? So let me check it is working or not. It should work. Let me check first before moving forward. Right click, terminate, and select this application, right click, run as Java application. I'm just running it once again. So what I'm doing is that I'm starting the server, and the request that I have to send, the request should go in this path /home. Let me send the request in this path /home. That is http://localhost:8080/home. Enter. So when you send the request in this, okay, fine, just save this. So when the request will come here, now what this login check method will do? What it will do? So it will, what type of request it is? If you see here from this page, it is post type request. So in here, I have to use /login method request post. It's post type request, right? Okay, fine. Now here, so when I send the request, so I'm going to send HTTP servlet request object. Okay, so HTTP servlet request this object I'm going to send, right? Yes, if you go to Spring MVC, there is some lots of other implementation is there. I'm coming all those things step by step. So here HTTP server request object, I'm sending in the parameter inside the method. Fine. So I can get both user ID and password from this request object. Just take it. The string UID equal to request dot get parameter, request dot get parameter. Now here which parameter I'm going to send some parameter like what is the parameter name? Its name is UID. Okay, so UID. Similarly, I have to take the password. So take this password from the request object. Pass, get parameter, pass. Okay. Now, when you got user ID and password, now what you want to do is that I want to use login check method to check whether user ID password is true or not. So you can write here boolean b equal to we can use or you can get an object of, now the service layer is there, right? So I have not yet created service layer. Fine. So assume we have one method login check. Login check. This is CHECK. So what I'm going to do is that assume I have one class, because if you see here, login controller is going to interact with whom? Login service, right? Login service dot java that you're talking about here. So assume you have one class called login service dot java, login service dot java, and inside this login service dot java, we're just providing, that class name login service, like public boolean login check. Okay, return. For the timing, I'm just writing like this. So assume it is going to take the parameter as a string UID, string password. This is a login service method. Okay, so you're calling this login service method from the controller. How? Creating an object of login service. So login service ls equal to new. I'm not going into the advanced implementation of interface implementation class. Just our main focus is that how we can execute the same application in the Spring Boot environment and how I can improve it. So login service. So I have created a login service class object, controllers, and then you're calling ls.logincheck, ls.logincheck, and here you pass two parameters. One is called UID, another is called password. That's it. ls.logincheck. So you can see here ls.logincheck. Yes, it's correct. Okay, just change the method name. And it is going to return a boolean value. From this, is going to call the service layer. Service layer login check is going to return boolean value true or false, whatever it is. So if it is true, then it will forward send the request to success page. Else it is going to return the request for failure page, right? So how I can do that one? So you can write if B is true. Okay, so in that case, you can write, just for understanding purpose, I'm using success model and view. Okay. Return else return new model and object failure. So this type of condition you can implement like this, and it should work without any error, right? So right click source format, you can define, save it. Now what I told here is that the service layer is interacting with the control layer is interacting with the service layer. If you see, this controller layer is interacting with the service layer. Service layer is interacting with the DAO layer. So this is my service layer that we have used here. So if service layer is interacting with the, we can implement DI. I'm coming on all those things step by step. Now the service layer is interacting with the DAO layer. DAO layer interacting with the database, it will be happen like this, right? So what I'll do, I'm not going to the DAO layer. Let me implement the logic here itself. If you want to implement DAO layer, it's fine. So right click, new class, use the class name as login DAO. Okay, inside the login DAO, you can use the same method, Control C, login check. Now here you're taking user ID and password, so you can just write if UID dot equals UID dot equals, I can make it here as like ABC, assume ABC. If UID dot equals ABC, then return true, right? You can do it like this. Else return false, because login check, assume I'm going to check only one failed. Else return false. Okay, just save this, right click, source, format. So login DAO is actually, now see, generally we do the database interaction in this layer. For the time being, since we have not implemented a Spring Boot with database, once it is done, after that we'll do the database interaction. So service layer will interacting with the login DAO layer. Okay, so how we can implement? So we can write login DAO LD equal to new login DAO like this, and here you can just write return LD dot login check, passing these two parameters, Control S. Right, so it should be like this, So I think it is done from my side. So if it is returning success, it will go to successpage.jsp. Just write some statement using h1 called login success. And if you go to Control C, in the failure page, we'll talk about login failed. Control S, that's it. Control S, save. So I think it is done. So select your login page, right click, run as Java. It's okay, right? So let me just start the server once again. Right click, run as Java application. So if you see it is running the port number 8080, now I have to check if it is working. So port number I have to use http:// localhost 8080 / home, right? home, enter. So I got the home page. Now I have to copy the user ID. Assume I'm giving some wrong user ID, and I'm going to use some wrong password. Click submit. Then I should not get login success. I should get login failure, right? So let me check what is the problem. Similarly, if I'm going to use password, whatever it is returning to login success only. So you have to check whether the input parameter that I'm going to send is coming or not. So when I'm sending any parameter, let's see, it is ABC, password, whatever it is, submit, login success. Now see here, when I'm inserting some parameter, it will come to login page. So login page.jsp, see login page.jsp. Right, in the login page.jsp, it will come to user ID password and click submit button. It will form /login. It will go. Now in the login controller, you have /login. So when it comes to the /login, from the request object, you have taken user ID and password. Then I'm going to send it to login service login check. So it will go to the login service login check. Right. So this UID and password you are sending to login DAO. Now if we come to the login DAO, now in the login DAO, what you are going to do is that checking UID is equal to ABC. If it is equals to ABC, return true, else return false. So assume it is returning true. So service layer, this is should also return true, login check. So controller layer, login check should return true. So if it is true, then it will return a success page. Else it will return a failure. Okay, I have used both success. So here I have to use failure, right? Because 2 pages there. Let me check once again. ABC I've given and the password is something. Click submit. It is saying login success because ABC is the username. If I'm using some other username ID and some password, it is going to login failed. So it is working fine, right? And this is working fine using a SpringBoot. So using a SpringBoot, this is working fine. So this login service, what it is doing? A login service is interacting with login DAO .java. This login DAO is interacting with database. Database implementation we have not done here. That we will do tomorrow, not today. Now this is how it will work. Then login. This is how it will work, right? So this is how it will work. The response will come from the user like this, right? Now this is the login page where we have the view layer, we have the controller layer, we have the service layer and the DAO layer. And we have seen this use case, how it works using Spring MVC, using Spring Boot. Because in this example, we have used Spring Boot. Though we have not used them in a separate package, we should use them in a separate package, right? And the response we have used pages .jsp. Now, if you see this example, this example using Spring Boot, you are avoided lots of configuration on web.xml file as well as your Spring Dispatcher server.xml file. Okay, you have added, avoided, lots of, complexity. We don't have to handle all those things. Just provide the corresponding controller, service, and the DAO layer classes. And for UI layer, you can use application properties, how you're going to represent. And the pages layer, UI layer pages we have created inside the pages field, pages folder, right? So when you start, so it is working fine. If you see this example, it is working fine. Using SpringBoot, using Spring MVC, or Spring MVC using SpringBoot, right? Where all the dependency related issues is taken care of by who is handling by format.xml. Now, if you see here, it has SpringBoot starter web. These are the dependencies. Fine. So this is working fine. This is a very good example to talk about how I can implement simple use case like, though we have not used lots of advanced term here, we have to talk about lots of things. So how I create a simple Spring MVC application using SpringBoot. This is a very good example. Okay. It's a very good example that we talked about here. It's a very good example. Close all. And I'll suggest try it. Based on whatever the things we have done, I'll suggest try this. It will help a lot. Okay, next, what we will do next.